Sometimes betrayal doesn't just end a marriage, it detonates lives in a ripple no one sees coming. This is the story of Ethan, who thought he knew his wife, until a secret note, a private investigator, and a tangled web of lies turned his entire world upside down. Stay with me, because what happened next destroyed more than one family, and led to a downfall no one saw coming. The year was 2003, and Ethan Reed could practically set his watch to the sound of little feet pattering across the hardwood floor each morning. His kids, Ava and Ben, were 4 and 6, bright-eyed and loud, chattering about cartoons and snack time and how many stars they'd gotten on their sticker charts at preschool. Ethan loved the chaos. He loved the swirl of cereal milk on the kitchen table, the half-sung nursery rhymes, and the sweet, sharp scent of Leah's perfume lingering in the hallway. But lately, the perfume had been different somehow. Sharper. Like something trying to cover up another smell. It started small. A few times a week, Leah would announce she was taking Ava and Ben to her parents' house for the day. Ethan hadn't thought much of it at first. Leah's parents, Hank and Marlene, were good people, though getting to their house required a 90-minute drive each way. But then the visits became more frequent. 2, sometimes 3 times a week. One Tuesday evening, Ethan sat beside Leah on the couch, the TV flickering in the corner, and tried to sound casual. "Kids were saying they're going to your folks again on Thursday." Leah didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed on the TV, the blue glow painting her face. "Yeah. Mom's been missing them. It's no big deal. It's a long drive, that's all." She picked at her cuticle. "I like getting out of town." Ethan let it drop. But as the weeks rolled on, the kids kept mentioning Grandma's house. And Ethan started noticing things. Leah's hair smelled faintly like hotel shampoo some days. And she came back from her trips wound tight, eyes darting around as if waiting for a bomb to go off. One night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He got out of bed quietly, careful not to wake Leah, and padded barefoot into the garage. He flipped on the overhead light and stared at the hood of Leah's dark green sedan. Dust gathered around the edges of the license plate. He opened the door, leaned in, and checked the odometer. He squinted at the numbers in the dim light. It didn't add up. The next morning, he jotted the mileage in a spiral notebook and slipped it into the back of his desk drawer. Over the next month, he wrote down every number, every mile. The truth emerged in ink and paper: Leah was driving an extra 400 miles each week. But the worst part wasn't the numbers. It was the moments in between, when Leah stood at the kitchen sink laughing at something Ava said, or when she bent to tie Ben's shoes before school. Those moments were ordinary, and Ethan felt like he was living in a fake world, a play where his wife pretended to be his wife, while he stood alone in the audience. One afternoon, Ethan dropped the kids off at swim class and sat in the car staring into the middle distance. A dread had grown inside him, a tight, cold knot he couldn't untangle. He thought about his own childhood, about nights spent listening to his parents scream at each other over affairs and accusations, and he promised himself one thing. He would not let his kids grow up in lies. So he drove home, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white, determined to find out what Leah was hiding. It was a gray Thursday afternoon when Ethan Reed stumbled upon the key that would unlock his entire world, and blow it apart. Rain spattered the windows as he walked in from work, shaking droplets off his coat. He dumped his keys into the bowl on the hall table and headed toward the office nook, where Leah often used the computer to pay bills or check emails. And there it was, a small neon yellow sticky note, stuck to the edge of the monitor like a careless afterthought. Ethan stood frozen, staring at it. His heart thudded painfully in his chest, beating against his ribs like a bird trapped in a cage. He picked up the sticky note, turning it over between trembling fingers. He shouldn't. He knew he shouldn't. But the memory of Leah's distant eyes, the phantom scent of hotel soap, and the extra 400 miles weighed on him like lead. He lowered himself into the chair, slowly, like a man preparing to commit a sin. The computer hummed awake. His reflection glowed ghostly in the black screen as he opened the AOL login page. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. One keystroke after another, he typed in the letters. Starry Sky 03. When he hit enter, his breath caught in his throat. And then, suddenly, he was inside. The inbox was ordinary at first. Target promotions. PDA reminders. A recipe exchange from one of Leah's friends. Ethan scrolled, hands slick with sweat, eyes darting over the screen. Then he saw it, a series of subject lines, all from a single name. Melissa Carter. Melissa. Leah's best friend from college. A woman Ethan hadn't thought about in years. His pulse quickened as he clicked open the first email. Leah, you've got to be careful. Does Ethan suspect anything yet? Ethan blinked, rereading the sentence 3 times. He opened the next email. I can't believe you're still seeing Brian after all these years. Are you sure it's worth the risk? And then another. LOL about Brian's wife getting fat after the kids. You're terrible. But seriously, what if she finds out? Ethan felt the floor tilt beneath him. His vision blurred. His ears buzzed as though he were underwater. Brian. Brian Collins. The name punched into his brain like a brand. Leah's high school boyfriend. Ethan remembered him vaguely, a cocky grin in an old yearbook photo Leah had shown him once, a boy with bright eyes and a leather jacket. His shaking hand reached for the mouse. He clicked through email after email, piecing together the sordid puzzle. Leah was meeting Brian behind Ethan's back. They were sleeping together. And she was mocking Brian's wife for gaining weight. Ethan's mouth tasted like pennies. His entire body shivered. He felt as though he were standing outside his own skin, watching his life burn down in front of him. With numb fingers, he hit print. Page after page churned from the printer, each one an indictment, each one a nail in the coffin of his marriage. He gathered the stack, slid it into a plain brown folder, and hid it under the loose floorboard in the closet where he kept his old army duffel. Then he sat back at the desk, staring blankly at the computer screen. Rain still lashed the windows outside. It seemed to Ethan that the world should have stopped turning. But upstairs, he heard Leah's voice calling the kids for dinner, bright and cheerful as ever. Ethan sat very still, listening to the sound of plates clinking and his children's laughter echoing down the stairs, and he realized one brutal truth. He needed more than emails. He needed the whole story. Ethan barely slept after discovering Leah's secret. He lay awake, staring into darkness, the ceiling swirling overhead as if it were underwater. By morning, exhaustion sat heavy in his bones. But he pushed through it, driven by a single purpose. He needed proof. Real proof. Not just words on a screen. He drove to work on autopilot, ignoring the chatter of the radio, mind churning. Mid-morning, he stepped out into the parking lot and pulled out his cell phone. His hand trembled as he scrolled to a name he hadn't dialed in years. Officer Mike Carlson. Mike picked up on the second ring. Ethan. Long time. What's up, man? Ethan swallowed, his voice raw. Mike, I think Leah's cheating on me. I don't know what to do. Silence crackled on the line. Mike finally said, listen, you want answers, you don't want to confront her blind. I know a guy. Used to be on the force. Does PI work now? He's solid. Give me his name. 2 days later, Ethan found himself parked outside a drab office complex on the outskirts of town. A flickering sign above a door read, Marshall Investigations. Inside, the place smelled faintly of old coffee and photocopier toner. The man who stepped forward had a lean, lined face, close-cropped hair going gray at the temples. His handshake was firm. Ron Marshall, he said. Mike said you might call. They sat across a battered wooden desk. Ethan took a deep breath and slid the brown folder across the surface. Ron flipped it open, eyes scanning the printed emails. His face barely moved, only the faintest tightening around his mouth. "This is plenty to start with," Ron said at last. "Tell me everything else you've noticed." So Ethan talked. About the mileage logs. About the trips to Leah's parents. About the strange silences and hotel soap. Ron listened, jotting notes with a silver pen. Finally, he snapped his notebook shut. "All right. Give me a week. Maybe less. I'll find out exactly where your wife's going, and who with." Ethan walked out feeling lighter and sicker all at once. He wanted the truth. But he was terrified of what the truth might cost him. 6 days later, Ron called. "Come in," he said. "I've got your answers." Ethan arrived to find Ron waiting with a thick manila envelope. Ron slid it across the desk without a word. Ethan hesitated. His hand hovered over the flap. Then he pulled it open. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them. Each one sharp and cruel as a knife. There was Leah, wearing her favorite teal sweater, stepping out of her car. Another shot showed her in a cheap diner, sitting across from a man Ethan recognized immediately from old high school photos. Brian Collins. Brian's hairline had crept back a bit, but his grin was the same. The two of them were leaning close over the table, eyes locked, Leah's fingers resting lightly on Brian's wrist. Next came photos of a dusty motel off Highway 27. The sign outside read, "Moonlight Motor Inn. Daily rates. Color TV." Ethan flipped through the images, each one landing on the desk like a slap. Leah and Brian exiting the diner. Leah and Brian checking into the motel. Leah and Brian leaving 3 hours later, clothes slightly rumpled, faces flushed. Ethan felt something crack inside his chest. Ron cleared his throat. "She's been doing this same routine too, 3 times a week. Drops the kids at her parents'. Meets him for lunch. They head to the Moonlight Motor. Then she picks up the kids and goes home." Ethan couldn't speak. His tongue felt like sandpaper. Ron's voice softened. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I know this isn't easy. But you deserve to know." Ethan stared at a photo of Leah laughing beside Brian's car. He wanted to rip it to shreds. He wanted to scream. Instead, he quietly gathered the photos and tucked them back into the envelope. He stood, gripping the edge of Ron's desk until his knuckles turned white. "Ron," he said hoarsely, "I want one more thing. I want to know everything there is to know about Brian Collins." Ron gave him a slow nod. "Consider it done." Ethan turned and walked out, the envelope clutched in his hand like a ticking bomb. He drove home, not remembering a single mile of the journey, knowing only one thing for certain. His marriage was over. But this wasn't finished yet. Ethan stared out his living room window as twilight bled into night, the neighborhood bathed in soft porch lights. Kids' laughter echoed down the street, a sharp contrast to the silence inside his house. On the coffee table sat the thick manila envelope, unopened since he'd tucked the photos away. Just the sight of it made his stomach twist. But Ethan wasn't the same man he'd been a month ago. He'd tasted the truth, and now he wanted it all. He picked up his phone and called Ron. "Did you find him?" Ethan asked without preamble. Ron's voice was calm, like a surgeon preparing bad news. "Yeah. His name's Brian Collins. Lives about 40 minutes from you in Cherryville. Married. 3 kids. Vice president of sales at a company owned by his father-in-law. His wife's name is Julia. They live in a house that's technically owned by her parents." Ethan let out a slow breath. "So he's cheating on her too." "Looks that way," Ron said. "Same pattern every week. Lunch dates with Leah. Motel. Then he heads back home, like nothing ever happened. A wave of cold rage swept through Ethan. "How's Julia?" he asked. Ron paused. "From what I can tell, she's clueless. Thinks her husband's a hard-working family man." Ethan went silent. A faint ache pulsed behind his eyes. He thought about his own childhood again. About the secrets. The whispered fights. The bitter divorces. "I want her to know," Ethan said finally. "Julia deserves to know the truth." Ron studied him, eyes narrowed. "You sure? Once the lid comes off, there's no putting it back on." "I'm sure," Ethan said. His voice came out low and dangerous. "I don't want revenge. I want honesty. She's living in the same lie I was." Ron nodded once. "I'll take care of it." 3 days later, it all came crashing down. Ethan timed everything precisely. His lawyer finalized the divorce papers and arranged to have Leah served, at work. Leah's boss summoned her into the hallway, handed her the envelope. Co-workers glanced over, eyes wide with curiosity. Leah's face drained of color as she tore it open. At the same time, miles away, Ron Marshall sat across from Julia Collins in a small corner booth at a diner in Cherryville. Julia was petite, with dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She looked nervous, twisting her wedding ring on her finger. Ron spoke gently as he laid out the photos and timelines, telling Julia the truth in plain, devastating words. Julia blinked rapidly, her eyes swimming with tears. "This can't be real," she whispered. "Brian, he wouldn't." Ron sighed. "I'm sorry, ma'am. But it is." Julia stared at one photograph, Brian and Leah outside the Moonlight Motor Inn. Her lips trembled. She pressed her palm over her mouth to muffle a sob. "Thank you for telling me," she managed finally, voice shaking. "I needed to know." Ron simply nodded. "What you do next is up to you." That night, Ethan sat alone in his living room. The kids were asleep. The house felt cavernous, echoing with a silence so thick it almost hummed. His phone buzzed with a message from his lawyer. "Leah has been served. Call me when you're ready to discuss next steps." Ethan set the phone aside. He was exhausted, every cell in his body worn thin. But for the first time in weeks, he felt relief. He'd torn the mask off the lies, both his and Julia's. And though he knew chaos was coming, he also knew this. No one would live in the dark anymore. Not on his watch. The storm arrived faster than Ethan could have imagined. Just days after Leah was served, Ethan was packing a small overnight bag to stay with a friend when the phone rang. "Ethan, it's Ron. Hey. Thought you'd want to know. It's all hit the fan over in Cherryville." Ethan held his breath as Ron spoke. In Cherryville, Julia Collins didn't waste a second. After Ron left her at the diner, she'd gone home, quiet and glassy-eyed. Brian was there in the living room, watching ESPN, oblivious to the tidal wave about to hit. Julia calmly told him she knew everything. About Leah. About the motel. About the lunches and the laughter. Brian tried to deny it at first. He grabbed Julia's shoulders, pleaded, promised. But Julia wasn't listening. She packed a suitcase and told Brian she was taking the kids. That same night, Julia emptied their joint bank accounts and drove the children to her parents' house. The news reached her father by breakfast. A powerful man, owner of the business where Brian worked as VP of sales, he called Brian into the office and fired him on the spot. By sunset, Brian was not only unemployed but also evicted from the house he'd shared with Julia, a house technically owned by her parents. The chain reaction was merciless. Ron continued, his voice grim. There was a big blow-up when Brian showed up at Julia's parents' house. Started screaming. Julia's brother stepped in. Broke Brian's nose. Ethan closed his eyes, picturing the chaos, the arguments, the police lights flickering across manicured lawns. Restraining orders filed. Police called multiple times. Brian's facing charges for harassment and trespassing. Ethan opened his eyes. And Julia? She's okay. She's gone to work for her dad. Word is, she'll be running the company one day. She's tougher than she looks. As Ron finished recounting the fallout, Ethan sat in silence, processing the magnitude of what he'd set in motion. 2 families blown apart. 1 man destroyed. And yet, a twisted part of Ethan felt vindicated. Not gleeful, but sure he'd done the right thing. He thought back to the photos of Leah laughing with Brian. The years of lies. The secret drives to the Moonlight Motor Inn. He felt no triumph, only a clean, steady quiet inside his chest where pain used to live. In the months that followed, Ethan's divorce from Leah was finalized. Their interactions were polite but cold, revolving only around Ava and Ben. No more late-night fights. No accusations screamed across rooms. When the kids turned 18, Ethan quietly cut off all personal contact with Leah. Not out of hate, but because he simply didn't care anymore. Leah remained the mother of his children, and that was all she would ever be to him. One crisp autumn morning, Ethan found himself standing on his porch, coffee steaming in his hand. He gazed at the maple trees lining the street, their leaves ablaze in reds and golds. The sun rose slowly over rooftops. A soft breeze carried the distant sound of kids laughing as they waited for the school bus. Ethan inhaled deeply, feeling the chill of the air fill his lungs. He was alone. But he was free. And for the first time in a long time, he felt a fragile, tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, life would be okay after all. Betrayal can shatter lives, or set us free. What would you have done in Ethan's place? Drop a comment below, and if this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true tales of love, loss, and justice. Thanks for watching.